those who have picked up your workshops, you'll notice little check marks. That means you got credit for handing them in. They are not graded. I like to look at them to get a sense of where there might be some confusion. When I see the same not quite correct answer on a bunch of papers, I know I should explain something, and that will happen today for statutes, actually, for updating statutes. There's an interesting complication that we will look at in a little while. And other housekeeping news, thank you all for submitting your assignment 1. I will get that back to you, I'm hoping a week from Friday, but definitely before assignment 2 is due. I will be distributing assignment 2 at the end of today's class. It will be due in 2 weeks, so 2 weeks on a Tuesday, so I will definitely get assignment 1 back to you before assignment 2 is due, so do take a look at that. The exam, I finally got everybody's dates, and I have found 2 days that will work for at least everybody. You may not be able to do both days, but you'll be able to do one of them, and those days you will get to choose between Thursday, April 30 and Friday, May 1. I know you all have busy exam schedules. There was really just no other date that worked as well, or set of dates. So as I said, I know a few of you have exams on one of the other days, but not both. So you get to, for those of you who don't have exam on either of those days, you get to choose whichever one you want, but you choose only one. Again, I will go into far more detail at the end of the semester, but if there's something that's concerning you, or heaven forbid stressing you out, please let me know. I'll be happy to address it earlier than that. I'll be posting all of this information on the course website. Okay, any questions regarding any of that? Then let's dive into today's topic, which is state statutes. And what I always think of this class as the wash, rinse, repeat class. We've looked at federal statutes, we've gone into the details, and really state statutes work the same way, with the minor exception that a lot of the names have been changed. So really same concepts apply, just sometimes different names. So let's take a closer look at that on the Sources of the Law handout, which I gave you last time. Again, also available on the course website under statutes. You can click on it and you'll get to this link that we're looking at the screen if you prefer to look at it that way. And again, remember, we start with a session law. Again, remember, session law is just the generic name for the law that's passed by the legislature and signed by the executive. They tend to be organized chronologically, as I referred to them in our screencast, on planets. So they would be either in statutes at large, abbreviated STAT, or a USCAN in the federal world. And again, their federal name is called public law. This is all from last time. And that was our hero in our screencast. Remember, public law, the little picture of the fellow getting his head signed by the president. Okay, so let's now move over to the state column, to the New York column specifically. So if we move over and we see session law, it's called public law in the federal world, and it lives in these planets. Anybody want to venture a guess? What is in New York, what is a session law called? Pardon me? Statutes at large is the set, or like I like to say, the planet where the federal laws live. See, statutes at large is here under the federal column. Look under the state column. What's a session law called? Anybody? Venture a guess? All guesses welcome. Gives me a chance to review. So public laws in the federal world live in statutes at large and USCAN. State laws in the New York world are called chapter laws. So again, just go across in the chart and it will give you the answer. And chapter laws live in McKinney's session laws. See, this chart doesn't line up as nicely as the paper handout does. I'm going to have to fix that. So sorry about the confusion on the chart. So McKinney's session laws look like this. So red books. And again, these are session laws signed by the New York legislature. So New York legislature is the Assembly and the Senate. Passed by the Assembly and the Senate, signed by the executive, the governor in New York. And again, in New York, we call them chapter laws. Other states also use chapter laws. I know a couple of you are interested in possibly going to Florida, Massachusetts, or New Jersey. Most states, they're all called chapter laws. Again, just the name for a session law. It's like, again, soda and Coke, soda and 7-Up. So we've got 7-Up, or rather session law is the soda, is the generic, and chapter law is the specific name in a state. Other states have different names. In Connecticut, called it public acts. Other states, Pennsylvania, also public laws like the federal. I don't know why the states decide that way, but that's what they did. So main thing to remember is the state you're most interested in. So for us, for most of our examples, it will be New York. So those are known as chapter laws. And just, again, back to review, we have the power of the force. Remember in our screencast, so force means we put in a subject arrangement all of these public laws, and just as importantly, the force brings us only the currently in force laws. Remember, we don't want to worry about federal public laws back from 1896 that are no longer in force. You don't have to look through the thousands and thousands and thousands of public laws that aren't in force. You just want the ones that are currently in force. So that is what codification does for you. That's why I refer to it as the power of the force. And so we've got two things that codification does. Arrange by subject, so help us find laws on a topic, and again, currently in force. So in the federal realm, again, review from last week, we find the codification in the U.S. Code. The name actually kind of gives us the hint that it's a codification. So U.S. Code is the official source published by the U.S. government, but remember, it's a little bit behind and has that funky 6-year publication schedule. We also have annotated codes, our BFF for research, our best friends for research. They're published commercially, so they're unofficial, the USCA and USCS. So going over here, and again, I know this isn't lined up very well. Your print handout in your handout from last week is lined up, so that makes a little more sense. But in New York, our codification is in two places. It's in McKinney's code. It's also in a code called CLS. For reasons I honestly don't know, in New York, we have no really official government published code. So we have two unofficial commercial publishers. We have McKinney's. McKinney's is published by West, now known as Thomson, well, bought out by Thomson Reuters. So this McKinney's is going to be on Westlaw. And I'll warn you now, when you hear McKinney's, just think New York Code. All the lawyers in New York, they don't say New York Code, they don't say codification, they certainly don't refer to it as the force. That's just mine. But they do refer to it as McKinney's. Like, I don't have an exact percentage, but 98-something% of lawyers just refer to the New York Code as McKinney's. So it gets a little bit confusing. McKinney's session laws, remember where the chapter laws are, and we have McKinney's the code. Notice this is the big fat red volume, session laws. We won't use those very much. This is the smaller black volumes. If you were using these in print, this is what you'd use most often. Just beware if you are using the books, and this confuses new attorneys all the time. When I sit at the reference desk, I answer this question a lot. So lawyers, I just told you, they refer to New York Code as McKinney's. So lawyers come in and they look on the shelf because they know what they're doing and they're not going to bother asking the reference librarian. And they see McKinney's. And they pull McKinney's and they get all confused because on the spine, McKinney says session law. On the actual code, which is the set that they really want, it doesn't say McKinney's on the spine. And of course, when it's sitting on a shelf, that's all you see. Now, it seems like a ridiculous amount of detail, but trust me, I've answered this question enough times from attorneys that spend 15, 20 minutes plus spending time being confused. And again, if they had asked us, I'd tell them, no, the McKinney's you want are these smaller black volumes. That's the code that you don't really see the word McKinney's. You'll see it if you pull it off the shelf on the front. So I'm going to pass these around so you get to know closely if you ever do need to use the books. What you want to be looking for, which again is the black volumes. So as I mentioned, McKinney's is a commercial publisher, Thomson Reuters, what we'll find on Westlaw. There is another publisher, Lexis, and they publish CLS. So when we go on Lexis, we're actually going to see references to CLS. Now, CLS went and pulled a trick on me. They used to be blue, so I used to be able to refer to McKinney's as the black volumes, but CLS went and changed the color on me. So they're black too. So now you really just have to remember CLS is one commercial publisher, Lexis, and McKinney's is a different commercial publisher, Westlaw, and most lawyers just use McKinney's. So I'll pass around CLS as well. Okay, so let's take a little bit closer look at finding New York statutory law. And for that, let's start with Westlaw for no particular reason other than that's where the tab I have up here first. And it's going to make me sign on again. Okay, so if we are going to do statutory research and we want to find statutes on a particular subject, say, oh, I don't know, HMO liability maybe, where would we start? What do I suggest our strategy? Where's the best place to start research? Yeah, excellent. Secondary sources. So here I have done a search for liability HMO in New York. Now I usually say for secondary sources, don't narrow your jurisdiction initially, but if I know I'm ready, okay, I've done my research for general liability for HMOs, and I really want to just see what New York has to say, then I have a good articulated reason why to narrow to jurisdiction. So that's what I'm going to do, narrow to New York. And a bunch of different sources. Some of you might remember that I am a fan of New York jurisprudence. And don't go there just because I'm a fan, or actually the reason I'm a fan, and hopefully you will find a source that you like as well. New York jurisprudence might be it. The reason I'm a fan is it's a great introduction to New York law. It's not like AMJUR or ALR, which is all a bunch of different states. If I know I want to answer a question in New York, I'm done with my general research, I have a New York question. Or you're just researching a question, you just know, I don't care what anybody else does, I just need New York. New York Jur is a great, great place to start. And it turns out to be true for our issue as well, because here's, I think, item number 5 or 6 in our item number 5 in our Westlaw results was this New York Jur section that you all found actually way back in our first workshop on health maintenance organization. And New York Jur gives us a reference to, actually this is footnote 2, but I think probably footnote 1 as well, the public health law in New York. So actually I'm going to go here, and is it going to make me, it's going to make me do that. All right. So let's go to the public health law in New York. So unlike the federal code, remember the U.S. code, we had the code title. Title 29 was labor, Title 26 was tax, Title 42 is public health and welfare. So the federal code has numbers for its titles. In New York, we just have names. A couple of other states do that as well. Texas is one. So in New York, we don't have any numbers to the titles. We just call it the public health law, and then we have the section. So public health law, section 4410 is the reference we got from New York Jur. And so here is what that looks like. Now this is true for federal code, using the federal code as well, but for some reason the state codes seems to be what trips people up a lot. This is a mistake commonly made, and that is not looking at your statutory scheme. What do I mean by that? I mean the context, the headings of your section. This is especially true for keyword searching, because you just get random sections all over the code. But if it has your keywords, everybody thinks, oh, it's got my keywords, it's got to be relevant. Not true for codes. So whenever you click on a code section, federal or state, check that statutory scheme, check that context. And all I mean by that is the heading. So we know we're in McKinney's, we know we're in the public health law, consolidated laws, that's fine, and health maintenance organizations. So we know we're talking about health maintenance organizations having to do with health law. We know that's useful. If we go back to our, see if I can get back to my results here. So I'm going to give you an example of where you might get tripped up. Not so much in this search, but this does happen in other search. So I did my search liability HMO. I'm now looking just at New York code. And if for whatever reason, now our section does come up pretty high, so we would have found it. But if for whatever reason, another search we did, you might find an example. So here's an example of a code section with our search terms, but it's the mental, if I didn't look carefully, I wouldn't notice that it's actually the mental hygiene law, which is not applicable for our client, right? But our search terms are in there. So don't get confused. Look at that heading information. You want to do that anyway, because remember, you want to look at the table of contents. So let's go back to our relevant code section to remind ourselves why the table of contents is so useful. So there's 4410 again. So our same section that we got referenced from New York Juror. And again, on Westlaw, we can use the table of contents link here and just scroll up. So we might notice, look at this, 4406, Health Maintenance Organizations Regulation of Contracts. Since we're talking about our contract, our client has maybe at issue whether the HMO is following that contract. I might want to check that out. And I always want to look for definition sections, 4401. Now, there may not be a definition in a term defined in 4401 that's of interest, but I definitely have to check. So first way to check my table of contents, and then I want to work my way up the hierarchy. So just article, which actually we just looked at, and then this chapter 45, and then finally the public health law. Any questions about statutory scheme or context? I use both words or both terms interchangeably to help you understand, but if that's confusing, I'll just stick to one of them. Statutory scheme or context work? Okay. So let's now take a look at what all this looks like in the books that have been traveling around. And again, I'm giving you a walkthrough so you can see it up close and personal. So turning to page 1 of the walkthrough handout, we are looking here at this very volume that just passed around. So here's the title page. We've already, again, looked at the difference between the code, which is where you really want to be looking 95% of the time. And here's the session laws, which you'll look at only 5% of the time when you actually need a chapter law or when we talk about legislative history in a couple of weeks. Let's turn to page 2 of the walkthrough. We'll do that. And all you see here, again, what the table of contents looks like in the, do we need to pass more of these around? Pass the pile around and whoever needs to. So on page 2, we just see the table of contents, what that looks like in the book. So again, you would go to the beginning of Article 44 and scan this context. How do you know that you need the beginning of Article 44? Hopefully you're thinking. Turn to page 3. And when you're looking, when you get that reference from New York Juror and you open up the book to section 4410, if you look up top, you'll see what article you're looking at. Art 44 means Article 44, hopefully not surprisingly. And that tells me, okay, page back, turn back pages to the beginning of Article 44. And you'll see that table of contents we saw on page 2. So here's the actual text of 4410. Turning the page to page 4 of the handout. On the bottom, you see the handy dandy arrow to the parenthetical. Again, this is the parenthetical telling me where this section, where section 4410, came from. So, okay, We should all know this. We said it out loud numerous times last time. So where did section 4410 come from? Somebody? Anybody? Right? Guesses are welcome. Or partially. So the parent, okay, good. No, this is good. If you're confused about this, then that means I need to explain it. So at the bottom, that parenthetical after the text of the section tells us where the section came from. Remember, our code sections come from the session laws. The session laws, the different sections of the session laws get transferred into the code, into their various subject arrangement. So 4410 got put in the public health law because it has to do with public health. And it came from, reading here, it was originally added from the laws in 1976. C stands for chapter 938. And it turns out this very section came from section 1 of chapter 938. Remember, the section numbers of our session laws are never the same as the section numbers of our code. So our code is 4410, section 4410. Our session law is section 1. 4410 and 1 are not the same, right? Again, remember those session law section numbers and code section numbers are different. So 4410 came from chapter 938, section 1, which happened in 1976. Then it says us right here, amended, so we don't even have to translate. So in 1993, 4410 got amended by chapter 538, and turns out it was section 6 in 538. So some part of 4410 also reflects something that happened in 1993 in chapter 538. And what does that semicolon mean? You all rolled your eyes at me last time when I made you read this 4 times. As amended by, thank you. So you get to roll your eyes, but nobody else. As amended by, so amended once again, 1996. Chapter 705, and it was section 5 in 705. Question?
Is there any way on a database to see which chronology, so you can see exactly which portions of this law have been added? I mean, of course, you can go back to the session laws to see exactly the wording there, but it's very helpful that
Mostly yes. Turn the page. Page 5, you're going to see something called historical and statutory notes. That's mostly going to answer, that's as good as you're going to get is the answer. We're going to look at historical and statutory notes next week. So answer to your question is historical and statutory notes, how that all works and why we care about them and what they can do for us, I will answer next week when we talk about legislative history. Everybody good with that? Luke, that work? Is that enough of an answer? Okay. Any other questions? All good ones so far. So back here on Westlaw, if I go to the bottom, just make sure I'm in the right spot here. Not quite the bottom. So on Westlaw, remember this parenthetical at the bottom are called credits. So here we have credits and same exact information, including the parentheses. So added 1976, chapter 938, etc. So you can see just how what it looks like in print versus what it looks like in Westlaw. We'll look at Lexis and Bloomberg in just a few. Okay. So continuing on print. So in addition, on page 5, in addition to those historical and statutory notes, which we'll talk about next week, we see references to secondary sources. So if we need additional explanation, how is 4410 applied? What does it really mean? Here we can read law review articles. We can look at other research references in ALR, in encyclopedias. You see the handy dandy arrow pointing to that New York jurors section that we looked at just a few minutes ago. So if we hadn't found it already, this would be a way to find further explanation. Turning the page to page 6. Actually, we see notes of decisions, but before we talk about that, I'm just going to show you the equivalent of the secondary sources. The research references on Westlaw, again, comes under context and analysis. And if you look here, we have the similar headings, right? We have law reviews, we have ALR encyclopedias. Actually, we have a couple of treatises. Nice thing. So again, how you can use your annotated code. This is an annotated code feature. It's one of the main reasons I say it's your BFF. It's your best friend. Because if you need further explanation, some of the statutory language can be pretty dense and arcane. If you need help understanding it, you can go to these secondary sources and the annotated code will point you exactly where you should go. Questions? Okay, now let's actually look at page 6 now that I had you turn to it, to the notes of decisions. The other reason annotated code is your BFF, it does some of your case research for you. How good is that, right? So here you have 4410, and now you have cases that discuss 4410. And not only do you have cases that discuss 4410, but they even tell you for what subject. And those are those topic headings that you see numbered. So on page 6, we see justiciable controversy, causes of action, vicarious liability, etc. Likewise, up here on Westlaw, we have a tab for notes of decisions. And we can see those topics here on the left, or we can just scroll down to see the topics. And nice thing, of course, on Lexis is you can click on the link to the case and read the case. Okay. So are we back to our print book? So if we're actually using the book, are we finished? Oh, you saved everybody from my banging on the table. I'm not sure if I'm happy or disappointed. A little bit of both. Absolutely. I can bang a little bit. The pocket part. So again, remember the pocket part. Turn the back. See the little funky papery thing here that's tucked in the pocket, hence the name. There is a reason for just about everything. You want to check the pocket part. Turn to page 7 and you see what that looks like up close. And there's the 2020 version. Turning to page 8, we look at 4410 and we don't see any text of the section. All we see are research references. Sometimes you might also see notes of decisions. If there were an update in the pocket part, it would look like what you see on page 9. So for that other section I pointed out, 4406, turns out the pocket part does update it. And that's what an update would look like. You see the section number, you see the name of the section, and then you actually see text rather than a label, research references or notes of decisions. Any questions about checking the pocket part in print? Should be pretty easy, not anything you have to worry about on Lexis, Westlaw, or Bloomberg, so that's a good thing. Okay, so in addition to using secondary sources, because they are super useful, you still need also to either do a keyword search or check an index. Probably online you're going to want to do a keyword search because that's what we're all used to, and it's definitely a very powerful tool, but it doesn't always work. So that's why I also refer you to the index. The reason why you want to do one of those additional steps is our secondary source may only discuss one part of the issue. So maybe our secondary source is really only talking about preemption. We know preemption is one question we have to answer, right? But the second, probably bigger question is, can we sue? Do we want to sue under Section 1132, or are there fiduciary duty issues? All of these might not be addressed in your secondary source search, so you also want to do a statutory search. And again, you can do that keyword or index. So just to review a little bit about how to use an index, because I know you all know how to do keyword searches. So our index, surprisingly, I'm sure this is all that interesting, but I'll pass it around anyway. So here's the good old paper index under H, and on page 10, you see what that looks like. The trick to using, one of the tricks to using an index is being flexible. So we want to look under HMOs, and there is a heading for that. Then do we want to look under coverage? Do we want to look under claims? Do we want to look under denial? Do we want to look under preemption? And the answer to those questions is all of the above. Try them all. Try them all in different order. Maybe the index covers claims, then coverage, or maybe it's the other way around. Just be flexible and be flexible in terminology. We found HMOs, health maintenance organizations, on page 10. Maybe I needed to look under managed care in a different index, or maybe I needed to look under health insurance or health plans. Again, be flexible. Turning to page 11. Oh, so on page 10, I don't turn quite yet. So you notice these abbreviations. INS, could probably guess it stands for insurance. You see PubHe, probably guess that's public health. Sometimes you may not be able to guess what code title to look under. Remember, New York, we name our code titles, we don't number them. So it's not going to refer you to Title 42 or Title 29. It's going to refer you to PubHe or INS. So the way you decipher this in print is you go to the very beginning of the volume. So Emily, if you can confirm for us at the beginning of the volume, you will see abbreviations of law references. And this is true for just about any print set. If you've got abbreviations in that print set, somewhere they're going to tell you what those abbreviations mean. So, see, I'm not making it up. So go to the beginning of the set. Sometimes it's at the end of the set, and not just legal books. If you've got abbreviations, the book probably is going to tell you what it is. So look at the beginning, look at the end, and that's what it looks like on page 11. And sure enough, if we turn to page 12, we discover that yes, indeed, PubHe means public health. I don't know about you, but if I saw an abbreviation RUELCP, I wouldn't have a clue. And I've been doing this for a whole lot of years, and I still wouldn't have a clue. So this is why this abbreviations table can be really useful. And last but not least, popular name. We talked a little bit about looking up in the popular name table. We saw the popular name table in the federal world. We have popular name tables for state acts as well. And sometimes knowing that is more important for states because you're probably going to find most acts by popular name on Wikipedia or somewhere on Google for federal. States, you might not find it so much. So it might be good to know that there is a table. I'm not saying don't try to Google it, what the New York popular name for, you'll probably find the New York lemon law, for instance. But you might not find, like, I think some of the names, laws that are named after people, like I think Kendra's law, and I don't certainly remember all of, or too many of them. So in print, you find it, it's a little hidden, so you find it in the last index volume, so after Z. So whatever the last volume that contains Z, the popular name table is going to come after that. I don't know why they don't give you a separate volume, but they don't. On Westlaw, you will find it, basically the easiest way I know of to get to it is just to navigate to the state code. So I'm just going to New York and I'm going to statutes and basically get to the beginning, the state code where you see the list of different titles. Again, there are no numbers in New York. And then over here on the right, you see tools and resources. So you see actually a couple of different useful tools. You see this popular name table. If you wanted to pull up a statute by section number, you find a template because I don't know about you, but I don't remember how Texas abbreviates its code or Wyoming or any other state besides New York for that matter. I don't even remember how New York abbreviates all of its different titles because remember they're all names, they're not numbers. So I get to this template, and then if I have a citation, if I have a code, New York code citation, I can plug it in here and pull it up on Westlaw pretty quickly. Any questions? Okay, so let's take a look at Texas fairly quickly. It's going to make me sign in again. And again, I like to, or it's not going to let me sign in at all, so we'll do it this way. And again, as I say, I like to call this class a little bit of the Washington's for Beat class. It pretty much works the same way. So slight difference I will show you. So I'm going to go to my liability HMO search. I've limited to New York, and I'm going to limit to statutes because I want to show you the statutes. Again, I would do this when I'm searching only because I have a particular reason I can articulate. This is why I want to go just to statutes, just to New York. And so notice here, I've done liability HMO, the same search I've been plugging in for the last several weeks. And I'm not finding that public health law. I'm not finding 4410. So Lexis hasn't pulled that up for us. If I go back and I type in a Boolean search. So we see liab exclamation, remember just to review, so liability, libel, all the different forms, /P within the same paragraph, HMO or health maintenance organization. So I know that either the abbreviation or the full name might be used. And again, I'm going to limit to statutes. And let Lexis hopefully is working. There we go. And interestingly, it came up on top. So sometimes for Lexis, for whatever reason, the plain language, natural language searching didn't do quite as good a job as Westlaw, I hate to say. I found in the past that Lexis natural language isn't as successful as Westlaw. Their super top secret algorithm, I don't know, they isn't as good. So it's good to know these Boolean searches. And honestly, sometimes it doesn't work as well on Westlaw either. But yet another reason why it's good to know those Boolean search operators, connectors. Okay, so again, watch, rinse, repeat. Check your table of contents on Lexis. Here it is on the left. You also want to always check that statutory scheme or context. So see what the heading information is. So again, we already know Article 44 health maintenance organizations and the public health law. So we know this section is good, but when you're looking at a new section you haven't seen before, check that statutory context. Again, to check the table of contents, you work your way up those links as well. So it's 2 reasons to check that heading information. And we have an annotated code on Lexis, just as we do on Westlaw. Navigates a little differently, so we can go down to take a look at that history to see that parenthetical. Again, on Westlaw, do you remember what it's called? We just looked at it. The parenthetical at the end of the statute to find out what chapter laws our code section came from. Credits. Excellent. You'll get the hang of it. And again, it all looks exactly the same, reads the same. We also have our annotated code features, our BFFs. So we have research and reference and practice, research references and practice aids. So again, references to secondary sources to help explain what 4410 means. And we also have notes of decisions. Again, that wonderful BFF annotated code feature that does the case research for us and gives us references to cases about our section and also gives us topics. Okay, any questions on Lexis? I will point out one other feature and then move over to Bloomberg. And again, if you have a particular state code that you are looking for and you can't figure out how to type it in, like how would I type in New York Public Health Law 4410, this Get a Doc Assistance will help you with that. It's pretty straightforward. If there are no questions, I will move over to Bloomberg. And you can see what I've done in Bloomberg here is I've typed in New York Public Health Law 4410, and Bloomberg's prompting me, do you mean citation? And I'm going to click on that and hopefully say yes. Again, Bloomberg looks a little bit different. It has fewer annotated code features. The main source of confusion for people, quite understandably, is this table of contents. You would think, oh, good, there's my very important table of contents. It's not the table of contents for the code. It's the table of contents for section 4410. So subdivision 1, subdivision 2. I don't know why they do that. I think it's not very useful, but that's my opinion. So if you need the table of contents on Bloomberg, you again must check that heading information. So the only annotated code feature on Bloomberg is called the Smart Code. That's what Bloomberg calls notes of decisions. So if you want to see cases that interpret 4410 on Bloomberg, you need to launch the Smart Code. Questions about Bloomberg? Okay, so as promised, I'm now going to talk about citators for statutes. You all probably learned shepherdizing and key citing in your legal writing class first year to make sure to update your cases. Ring a bell? Good, good, I see heads shaking. You can and actually should all use citators to update your statutes as well. It's a little tricky though, and this is where reviewing your workshops come in, because I discovered that several of you very understandably were confused about the updating information for statutes on the sections we were looking at. And so this is a great opportunity to review that, because this example is more confusing than typical, but obviously you encounter it because you did last week and you could be using this section. So I'm going to go back to Westlaw first, and I'm going to go to this section in question that many of you found. And that was 29 USC 2611. And this was the section in the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act. This is the definitions section. And I had asked you when the section was last amended. And some of you followed my explanation totally correctly, found the credits, read through the credits and found the last one and said Public Law 111-119 in December 2009. And that's the way you're supposed to do it. However, Westlaw is not very clear when it comes to updating statutes. And this is a major complaint I have about Westlaw. Lexis is much, much better, as I will show you in a couple of minutes. But especially since many of you prefer Westlaw, and it's just so confusing. So let me go back down because I want to highlight the numbers so you make sure to understand the difference. So again, in our credits, Westlaw is telling us the last update was 111-119 in 2009, so Public Law 111-119. However, up top, we get a red flag. So a lot of folks think when they see the red flag, it's not good law, which is not true when it comes to statutes. Not always true. Don't make that assumption. It can be true, and this is what makes me mad at Westlaw. One reason I don't like Westlaw, that red flag is very confusing. Sometimes it might be true, but not always. So don't make that assumption. So it's giving me red flag, enacted legislation amended by Public Law 116-92 in December 2019. So first of all, that's telling me that Public Law 116-92 has a change that Westlaw hasn't reflected yet in this section. So I'm going to have to open this up and find where this section is discussed to find that change. It's February already. What's up, Westlaw? The whole point of paying all the money for this wonderful service is to get something up to date. We're talking not quite 2 months, but pretty close. So you would want to click on that, and then you would need to basically Control F through for 2611. So by Control F, and I think on the Mac it's Command F, right, to do a search through a screen. So why is that not coming up? There it is. And it's actually a little tricky to find. Even though 2611 isn't coming up, it is in there. So what I wound up having to do is Control F didn't even work. I had to just kind of scroll through and find it. So again, the moral of this story is when you see that red flag, don't make assumptions, you have to investigate. So we also see these yellow flags, and we see a yellow flag and we see unconstitutional. Wait a minute, the statute section is unconstitutional. Again, when you see the flag, you can't make assumptions. You need to investigate to see what the case is talking about. And if it held that the entire section is unconstitutional, just a particular part was unconstitutional, or sometimes just how that section was applied by a different court was unconstitutional. And lastly, you see a yellow flag for proposed legislation, and that's legitimate. That's just telling you, hey, Congress has proposed some changes out there. They haven't taken effect. They haven't been passed yet, so they're not law, but just be aware the changes are out there. And that you'll see a lot, proposed legislation. So I understand that this is kind of in the weeds and pretty confusing, but if you hadn't spotted that change, you might miss a change in 2611. And if you're representing someone who is either wanting to take advantage of the FMLA or wanting to dispute the FMLA, you need to know about that change. So let's take a look. There are questions? Let's take a look at this on Westlaw and why I think it's so much better. So I'm sorry, on Lexis, and why I think it's so much better. So on Lexis, it tells us right up front, current through Public Law 11691, 91, not 92, approved December 19, 2019. Some sections may be more current. Please check the history segment. You gotta like it. They even say please. So let's follow their suggestion and check the history section. So just go to history. And sure enough, at the very end of history, now remember, history is the same as credits. It's just a different name for that Lexis gives it. So at the very end, we look at our last public law, last amending public law, and we see, sure enough, 116-92, not 91, which is when all of Lexis is up to date. And then it gives us the division and the title number. It even gives us the section of the public law number. So I don't have to do Control F and go searching through. I just go directly to section 7604, subsection B of public law. And it even gives me the statutes at large site. So I can go to that public law and see how 2611 has changed. And the fact that I can just go to history and take a look and see when the most recent change has been. And the fact that Lexis is telling me up here that, yeah, it's current through December 2019, but check out this change. So this is all done just as the flags are through Westlaw's key site flag function. Lexis citator is Shepard's. I'm actually going to click on this show signals. So Lexis is telling me to check this public law up here. And then when I look at Shepard's, Lexis is telling me, oh yeah, there's pending legislation. We saw that on Westlaw as well. And Lexis is also giving me the option to Shepardize this document to see how cases treat this section. And the signals on subsections that I just turned on is basically telling me that they're actually cases that interpret these particular subsections. So anywhere I see a Shepard signal, I know that they're cases that interpret just that subsection, as well as possibly cases that interpret all of 2611. So you can see what that looks like. I'm going to Shepardize the document. So the subsection reports by specific court citation is what I was just talking about. So here, Shepard's is telling me here's cases that cite to 2611 et sec, specific sections. And if I scroll down, you see the subsection, 2611 sub 1, 2611 1B2. So if sometimes statute sections can get that specific and you're really only interested in one specific subsection, this is a really nice way to get cases that talk about that specific subsection. Questions about that? I'm going to go back to our General Shepherd's report because, again, we saw that on Westlaw, we saw unconstitutional. Here on Lexis, I can see warning unconstitutional by, so I can see what case actually talked about 2611 as being unconstitutional, and it's the Sims case because it tells me here unconstitutional by. But it turns out, first of all, it's a appellate court case. I know that from the F3rd site. So an appellate court case can't entirely invalidate as a final measure a statutory site. An appellate court can put it on hold. It might get appealed to the Supreme Court. And I can also just look at what the appellate court has to say to see why it says this section is unconstitutional. And if you go into the Sims versus University of Cincinnati case, and you go to where it discusses our section, it turns out that it has to do with sovereign immunity. So basically what it's saying is when Congress put this particular language in section 2611 about states being sued, that part is unconstitutional, not the entire 2611. And yes, it took me some time to read through the Sims case to figure that out. So I basically scrolled through and found where the Sims case talked about that, and I finally determined, yes, that the sovereign immunity portion of 2611 was in fact unconstitutional, but not the whole thing. So depending on what your issue is, if you're arguing about sovereign immunity, and yes, that's usually important to you and you want to know about Sims. But if you're representing a client who wants to use the FMLA and is just talking about definitions generally in 2611, sovereign immunity, and you're not suing a state, you're suing a private employer on the basis of your client, you don't care about sovereign immunity. So really important. I know it's a lot of work and it's a little confusing, but really important to track that down. So as you can see, you have to be really super careful on Westlaw because you see a red flag, you can't assume, oh, not good law, or yes, it's fine, I can ignore it. You have to track it down. Any questions about that? And you also have to read Lexis and Westlaw really carefully about how up to date it is, and does it have any changes? Are there any changes pending that Lexis and Westlaw haven't incorporated that you need to check out? That's far more unusual. You will see a lot of red flags, especially on Westlaw, for statute sections that you have to track through. You won't see too frequently what we did with 2611. Stop. And what I saw as I was answering your questions, still a little bit confusion of what session laws are and do. So looking here at our New York Code section 4410, and again, remember, some state codes go by names and other state codes go by numbers for their titles. So in New York, this is the public health title. In the US code, there would be a title number. But back to how I started about session laws. Session laws are, again, the laws in their original form as they're passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. Session laws then get transferred over into the code, into the subject arrangement. So public health law, tax, general municipal, all the different subject titles. And you find what session law had responsibility for your code section back down here at the bottom. Westlaw calls them credits. Lexis calls them history. When you were looking in the books, there's just this parenthetical at the end after the text of the section. So you wouldn't see any heading, you'd just see the end of the section and then you'd see this little parenthetical. And again, all these session laws do is tell you where your code section came from and when it got amended, and the session law citation. So I know it's a little bit confusing and everybody was talking about how difficult it was, and of course back in the old day this was the only way to do it. I still would like to have folks do that. Couple of reasons. One, I was telling one group, every year, one of the questions the assignment's going to ask you to go look at the New York codes in print down in the library. And I always ask you to evaluate, and every year, one or two students, not too many, tell me that, wow, I actually like the print. It's easier. So there's some folks who still find looking at it in that different format and not having to scroll. Now, that's not to say you have to find it that way. If you think online is so much easier, then stay online. These days, you can find state statutes just as you can find the federal statutes online. I'll be reviewing that briefly in just a little while. Another reason is you may not have a choice with regard to different state statutes. If I guess these days really you can find it online, so that's less of a case, but you may be in a particular organization and they don't want you to go on Lexis or Westlaw, but they do have the books. Probably that's less of an issue now because even New York statutes, I'll show you where you can find them online for free, I should emphasize, on the web. So that is less of an issue. There may come a day where I don't do this exercise anymore. You can celebrate in future for your future Hofstra Law alum. Anyway, let's move on to talk about slightly different aspects regarding state statutes. You may encounter an assignment wherever you are working, either as a summer clerk or full-time. Somebody wants you to find all 50 state statutes on a particular subject or many of the state statutes on a particular topic. Back many years ago, while dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was still in a law firm, I actually had to do that for groundwater tanks or something awful like that. And that was before everything was online and I was in the library for hours and hours pulling the state statute books. There was, if I had known about this, a lot easier way of doing this. There are compilations of 50 state statutes. They're on Lexis and Westlaw. Just fair warning, these are one of the very expensive features of Lexis and Westlaw. So before you use it, make sure either A, it's in your plan wherever you're working, or B, it's okay to spend the money. Depends on who the client is, what the issue is. Pretty easy to find once you know they exist. So actually I'm going to go on Lexis just because I like the Lexis one better, but it works pretty much the same on both systems. So on either system, once I get back to the beginning, again, once you know they exist, so if you just type in 50 states, you see this is 50 states, statutes and regs. See a list of topics. You can do a search. This is an example. Well, I find it far more effective to browse, but whatever works for you. So we will guess in our, could be healthcare, could be insurance. Take a look at healthcare litigation. And this has to do with medical malpractice actions, not really going to be helpful for us because this is probably medical malpractice for physicians, but just so you can see what 50 state statutes look like and what I'm talking about here. It's kind of what it says. It's basically a compilation of all the state statutes on a particular topic. Gives you some, I like the Lexis one because it gives you lots of background as to exactly what it is talking about. And then you see the list of states. So you see the statutes for Alabama and Arkansas and going through. So again, if you get underground storage tank assignment for, you find all 50 state statutes on this, and you have access to this on Lexis and Westlaw, if there is such a compilation, this will make it a whole lot easier. So again, one of those tools you won't use very often in your toolbox, but good to know about in case you need it. And as I said, it works the same way on Westlaw. Really doesn't exist on Bloomberg, but if you are nearby and can come back to the library from wherever you're practicing or near another library that has Hein Online, Hein Online also has 50 state statutes. The trick on Hein Online is knowing to look under S for subject compilation of state laws. Once you know that, you can go to the database. And again, I prefer to browse the subjects, but you can try searching and seeing if that works. And again, if you have access to Hein, you don't have to worry about it if it's in your plan or not. And so browsing the subject, I might try our H for health And in fact, I will find health maintenance organizations. Hein looks a little bit different. What Hein does, instead of compiling all the information itself, the way Lexis does, Hein finds other people that have already compiled it. So Hein might refer you to a law review article where somebody in the footnote listed all 50 or a whole bunch of states on that issue. Hein might refer you to other texts that aren't law reviews that have state statute references for that particular topic. So again, not a resource, not a tool you'll use very frequently, but I think worthwhile knowing about. Something you will encounter, I think, more frequently in regards to state statutes, and that is references to uniform or model laws. How many of you remember the UCC? Contracts? What other class do you talk about the UCC? Yes, that makes sense. Secure transaction. Model penal code, ring a bell for crim law? Yeah, lots. So these are essentially model or uniform laws that are drafted by various organizations of experts. And they are either suggestions to states, hey states, since it really would help to have the same or similar laws in all of the states, like a commercial code, right? Here's a suggestion on what we the experts, think you should do. And hence that's how the UCC came about, and different states adopt their own versions of the UCC. They're very similar. They may or may not be identical. That's kind of up to how the state decides to adopt it. So a uniform law is actually put together by this organization called the Uniform Law Commission, not surprisingly, by the name. And they have now these acts are not law. These are suggestions to states on how they should pass their laws on particular subjects. So if we were, just to give you a sense, if we were to browse the acts, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you could see abandoned property, adult guardianship, anatomical gift, go through business certificate of title for vessels act. These get pretty specific, and again, these are just recommendations by this Uniform Laws Commission to states. Hey, it's a good idea to have some uniformity across the country. Here's what we propose, and states may or may not adopt them. To give you a sense of what a uniform law might look like, this is the, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. This is the Uniform Electronic Legal Material Act. So this is actually something that we librarians are very interested in. We're suggesting to states, hey states, you should make it uniform in terms of whether or not you consider the code that you put online to be the official version or not. Because so many people, here I am suggesting to you, go online to the free version of a code if you don't have it available on your plan. Wouldn't it be better if they were the official version and you knew you could rely on it? So anyway, I'm not trying to convince you that this is a great idea, but you can see these darker states are the ones, or the darker color states are the ones that have adopted the UELMA. So it seems to be more of a West Coast kind of thing. But there's some here on the East as well. So for these states basically say our statutes that we have online can be cited to as official. So knowing about these uniform laws and how they work can be useful. You can obviously find them at this Uniform Laws Commission site for free. They also exist in this set called Uniform Laws Annotated. The nice thing about it is it's annotated. Remember, annotated codes are our friends. So annotated means you can actually find cases that interpret these particular sections in the different states for however the states adopted it. So here's the UELMA, the volume with UELMA. You also get some more information about what the drafters had in mind, comments, kind of like restatements in a way. You also get a list of states, just as we see on the website with the map, with the nice map. You get a list of states that have adopted and where you would find those code sections in those states. If anyone's interested in this uniform law is annotated, so it's extra annotated. It's not free, and and it's not online, but it is, well, it's not freely available online. It's on Westlaw. Any questions about uniform laws? I mentioned the model penal code. That's a different group, but kind of the same idea. So you can find model codes here. Of course. Any questions? So these model.
And the same uniform document.
So uniform laws annotated. So the uniform laws annotated link is in the course website. I put the link here. I will, if I haven't already, then I'm not 100% sure. I'll put this model codes link there as well. And so these are different groups, but really the same idea applies. Questions? Okay. So as promised, I'm going to review where to find codes on the web for free. I showed you briefly last time federal codes, but want to go a little bit more in depth because that can be important. So one site we will continue to come back to when talking about federal materials is GovInfo. This is the Government Publication Office website. And so we'll find a lot of different types of government materials here, starting with, as we can see, the United States Code. And again, these links that I'm showing you now are on the course website. So this is showing you the actual official edition of the U.S. Code, again, because it's the Government Publishing Office. So it's not going to be very up to date. So this is where you would go if you needed an official PDF of the U.S. Code. Remember, when we saw the U.S. Code, it was only up to date at best through some point in 2018, which we actually see illustrated here. So the best we'll get is 2018, but as I said, it is official. Far more up to date, and honestly, my favorite site, and I'll show you why in a minute, is the code at the House of Representatives site. And the reason it's my favorite site is it tells me how up to date it is very easily. So I'm going to plug in a couple of different sections. So Title 29. So again, as I have been saying all evening, the U.S. Code has title numbers. So Title 29 is the labor title. In New York, the labor title is just called labor. And I'm going to go to Section 1144. That's our preemption section. Why did it do that? Because I entered it incorrectly. My bad. Back. So alrighty, so there we actually see the titles. That would have been a better page to start at, so you can see title numbers and then the actual names of the titles in the U.S. Code. And here's the template that I wanted, so we could go directly to a section. And here's what I mean about telling me how up to date it is. Text contains those laws in effect on February 10, 2020. So that's pretty up to date also, but it also tells it to me pretty clearly. I like that. So I'm curious. Let's look at our other section that we had so much trouble with, 2611. It's the same title, coincidentally. So text contains those laws in effect on December 19, 2019. So they haven't incorporated yet. Pending updates, PL 116-92. Let me say that slowly. Public Law 116-92, which was passed on 12/20/2019. And it gives me the link to details. I'm not sure how specific that gets, but again, at least it tells me they're pending updates. Pretty straightforward. A free site's actually better than Westlaw IMHO. So this is why I like the House site. And again, this link, this better link that I have now is on the course website. Another site that some people like because it gives a little more information, and this is also a great way to find state codes, is the Legal Information Institute. This is a legal portal put together by folks at Cornell, so I know it's reliable. And it gives me links, as I said, under this Get the Law, so we could take a look at the US code. And if I were to go to a specific section so you can see how up to date it is, well, let's take our chances and see what 2611 has to say. So here you have to know to go to this link how current this is. And so here it tells us published current through 116-91 as of 12/23. So it's not telling us about. It's not telling us about the updates. So they get, as much as I like LII, they get a little strike against them for that. Because to me, that's not as clear. Let's see what that says about 1144, although I imagine. So there's our preemption, and if we go to how current this is, again, it tells us the same information, which in this case is accurate, but for 2611 it wasn't. So again, but as I said, people like the LII because it also gives you, this is designed for non-lawyers, but it gives you a legal encyclopedia. Maybe I think it was you who was asking about a free legal encyclopedia online. This is about it. But it also gives us links to the state code. So if I go to law by jurisdiction, state law, it also gives us links to the uniform laws I was just talking about. But let's go to the law by state. So if I go to listing by jurisdiction, this is the way I like to get to different states' codes. Yes, you can Google it, and if that works for you, fine. I sometimes find that frustrating because the link might not be there until the fourth or fifth one in Google, and by the time I've found which one is the right one, I could have just gone here and been done with it. So again, depending on the state, start here, and then we could go to New York and find the New York statutes, or whatever other state. Those of you who are planning to go to other states can find it as well. And so here is a link to the New York code. Interestingly, this is a different link than the LII link. I'm kind of surprised LII gives us a different link, but either one is okay. The LII link goes to the Senate version. This link goes to the Assembly version. Again, I like this link, as you will see, because it tells us how up to date it is as of 2/11, so 10:47 a.m. So this morning, that's pretty good. Laws database is current through 2020, chapters 1 through 21. So right there, first page, it tells me. And that's not the prettiest site. So if we were to take a look at our public health law, and let's see, it does give us the section. So I'm scrolling down to 4410, and the way I am telling that is by looking at these numbers in parentheses, which we know Article 44 we already talked about. So let's go to 4410. And as you can see, that's kind of hard to read, I grant you, but it's there and it's free. And as I said, I like it because it tells me how up to date it is. Questions on free codes online? Okay, that is it for statutes. I'm going to pass around it and do a quick review, especially as we went through some of the material today and as I walked around with you downstairs, just to emphasize a few of the ideas we've talked about. Again, that the idea of the difference, make sure you understand the difference between a code and a session law. I know I've said this a lot of times, and hopefully, I know some folks are still confused, and that's fine. I think the best advice I can give you now, because I know it's getting late and we've heard it a number of times, when you're doing the assignment, when you see session law or code section or session law section, if you are confused, please come ask or email. The reference librarians can help you as well. I'm happy to help if you want to email me, whatever works for you. Make sure you understand those differences. And briefly review, I promise. So we've got the code section we're in Title 29 USCA. That's the labor code, again, because we have numbers in the US code. At the bottom, Westlaw is called credits, Lex is called history. We have the source. So we're talking about federal laws, so we're talking about public laws. If we're talking about state session laws, then in New York, we're talking about chapter laws. So again, that public law number, so it tells us the Congress number and then just the number, and then the section within the public law. And again, remember, here's the section within the public law, section 101. 101 is not anything like 2611, right? 101 does not equal 2611. It's about as much math as I'm going to give you in this course. But remember it. It's not a lot of math, but it's important math. So again, if you remember that difference between the session law section and the code section, I will elaborate in one other way to also remind you, I have, as I've been mentioning, I have a lot of useful links here. So we are in the course website, modules, statutes. And we have all the links that I talked about, including that popular name tool and the table 3 tool, what I call the translation table. And going to the translation table is where you will, I think, gives a great visualization of the difference between the numbers. So I'm going to 93406 is our public law number for ERISA. And here you see the differences. So Act Section 1 is Code Section 1001. Now they somewhat similar because there are ones in there, but 1 does not equal 1001. So we were looking at Section 514, which is the preemption section. 514, public law section number, becomes 1144 code section number. 514 is nothing like 1144. And again, what happens, and maybe this is worth saying again, what happens is the public law covers a whole bunch of different topics. So our ERISA public law talked about labor, talked about tax, that talked about insurance. Those different sections in the public law got separated out and put in the code subject arrangement. So it went in, so some sections went into labor and some Title 29 and some sections went into tax, Title 26. I think there were a couple of sections that went into Title 18, which is the criminal law title, I think, in the U.S. Code. So again, codification does 2 wonderful things. Subject arrangement, currently in force. So a lot of you were really good downstairs about remembering to check the table of contents. A couple of you, one group, our Texas group had a hard time because the pocket part didn't give us a table of contents. Some nerve. Most of the times you won't have that problem in print and certainly online, but every once in a while codes do funky things. So what they had to do is improvise, and they just had to flip through to look at the sections around their section. Again, most of the time, table of contents will be there. Remember to use it. It is a wonderful, wonderful tool to help you find sections on the same topic. Table of contents is also the heading information will also not only give you access to the table of contents, but will also help you make sure that you are in the right statutory scheme or context. So in our FMLA example, here it says family medical leave. So I know if I do a keyword search, if I look at this heading information, I'm talking about family medical leave. That may be exactly what I want, or I may have used search terms that might have nothing to do with FMLA. By looking at this heading information, I will find that out and know that this is either really on point or not very useful. So table of contents 1 feature, remember your other useful annotated code, your BFF features. So of course, notes of decisions. It's done the case research for you. Maybe not all of it, but it'll get you started and give you topics. Some folks like, actually, it also gives you, we looked at this in Crit 2, references to secondary sources to help explain what all this means. Sometimes code language can be really difficult to understand. Context and analysis, or Lexis research references, gives you explanation. Now, some of you are going to want to go to citing references. That's fine. It just does something different. Context and analysis and notes of decisions are more targeted to the specific section that they are under. Citing references are just going to tell you what cites to this section. It may cite to the section in a passing reference, having not really discussing your area, just saying, oh yeah, by the way, this was sort of relevant 2 years ago. It's okay to use citing references, it just has a different focus. What citing references do, and we'll look at it more carefully when we talk about case research, citing references gives you much better filtering on the side capabilities. And that'll become really useful for us when we do more in-depth case research. So as I said, citing references are not wrong, they just serve a different function. And lastly, and I know this was confusing, and I tried to help explain it. If you have questions, please ask. And that's the whole updating thing. So here we are in 2611 with that red flag. When you're on Westlaw, please, for statutes, please don't assume, oh, it's bad, it's no longer good law. It's not that simple, sadly. You need to investigate. And I know I gave a very involved explanation, because that was the only way to really to figure it out. So by all means, if you need help, I didn't ask for too much depth in the assignment, but in real life, if you know to ask, whether it's a reference librarian or actually you could call Westlaw. Something I haven't talked about, a really wonderful research resource that you have as students are the 1-800 or the chat, if you prefer that, on Lexis and Westlaw. Once you go out to practice, they are free. You have what are called West reference attorneys and Lexis, I forget their exact titles, but same thing, 1-800 number or a chat reference or a chat help. You can ask them, why is there a red flag in front of this statute section? I'm not understanding, and they will walk through with you over the phone or through the chat. For our purposes, again, just don't make assumptions about the red flag and then just follow the references. Honestly, what I would do here as either students or as me, I would go to Lexis because I think it makes more sense. If it makes more sense to you on Lexis, that's a great alternative. For now, if you wind up working somewhere and all they have is Westlaw, then it's not an alternative. Then you have to try to figure it out, and that's where you'd want to either call for help or call someone for help, either a reference librarian or Westlaw, or to see if you can work through the links to figure it out. Okay, so in looking specifically at the assignment, just a couple of things I want to explain. First, just a reminder, please go ahead, please remember to put your name on top of your assignment. You will see a question like the one in part 1 in the rest of the assignment. So what part 1 is doing is asking you to look back to your prior assignment. So all you have to do is give me the answer you gave in assignment 1. Assignment 3 won't have it, but assignments 4 and 5 will ask you to refer back to older assignments. So don't overthink that and think, oh my goodness, what do I have to do? Just give me the same answer and that's fine. Then you'll see the hopefully familiar tables. Part 2, I ask you to look on all 3 services, Bloomberg, Lexis, and Westlaw. Again, I ask you to answer all the questions for one service before going to the next. That's just going to make your life easier, I think. Emily, question?
We'll get our assignment ones before we hand this in. If for any reason the answer that we gave in assignment one isn't correct, should we still put it as the answer for the next one, or should we talk to you about adjusting it, or just try to adjust it on our own?
So if the answer in assignment one for this question isn't correct, the only way it would not be correct is if you just left it out in assignment one. And if you left it out in assignment one, then just see if you can find a better answer better than leaving it blank for assignment, for this assignment. It may not be the most ideal answer, but that's fine. That's part of the purpose of putting it in there, because in later questions, I'm going to ask you to look at that and say, was that useful? And a perfectly legitimate answer was, no, that wasn't useful. Excellent question. Okay, so part B, so part 2, Roman numeral 2B is the print portion, where I'm going to ask you to go to the print New York codes in the library. If you don't know where they are, just ask somebody. They're actually right near the reference desk. When you are going to the print codes, remember, looking for McKinney's, remember to look for the black McKinney's, not the red McKinney's, as we discussed earlier. And if you have trouble with any of that part, again, you can ask the reference librarians, you can ask me. I would ask me the what do you mean by questions in the question, but ask the reference librarians, how do I find this in this